Does God lie in 2 Chronicles 18? I recently posted a video about whether God has the ability to sin or not. Whether he can or can't doesn't really matter in the case of that video because God won't sin. I was challenged with the point that God does lie and in fact write in Scripture, and that because of that God is not just. I was posed with this question about 2 Chronicles 18. In 2 Chronicles, it's talking about King Ahab. So, just for some background before we start into this, in 1 Kings 21, King Ahab wanted a vineyard and couldn't get it. And so he moped, and his wife then decided to write letters in his name, devising a plan to have the man that owned the vineyard stoned to death. And so it was. From that point, it was said that there was never anyone like Ahab, who sold himself to do evil in the sight of the Lord and caused Israel to sin. God proclaimed judgment on him because of that. And at that point, King Ahab freaked out, humbled himself, and God held off his judgment. So, then we head into 2 Chronicles 18. Here, King Ahab wants to go to war against a neighboring people. And by this point, Ahab was far worse than the last time that God withheld his judgment. And so, Ahab gets King Jehoshaphat, who was a mostly faithful king of Judah, and he asks him to go to war with him against Ramoth-Gilead, to which Jehoshaphat agrees. Now, Ahab had his prophets come and basically tell him what he wanted to hear, that he would win. But Jehoshaphat, being faithful, asks if Ahab has any real prophets of the Lord, and so they call Micah. And King Ahab to Jehoshaphat announces that he hates Micah because Micah has never had anything to tell the king that ends up being favorable. So, when Micah shows up, he agrees with the 400 or so prophets that said that Ahab should go to war and that he would win. But King Ahab calls him out and says that he should only tell the truth. And maybe it was his mocking tone that set him off, or the way that Micah said that. But he then goes on to proclaim that Israel will be shepherdless after this battle. After that, he details a scene about why the 400 prophets were all saying that Ahab will win. This scene shows God the Father sitting on the throne with a heavenly host on his right and his left, and he's declaring, "Who will bring about the judgment of King Ahab?" To which a spirit comes forward and says, "I shall go out and be a lying spirit in the mouths of the prophets." So God says, "Yes, go and do that. You will persuade him and prevail." Then the scene shifts to Micah yelling at them. It says in 2 Chronicles 18, verse 22, "Therefore look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you." In answer to Micah yelling that at them, Zedekiah slaps Micah. So, now, knowing the context of that chapter, God allows a lying spirit to use these prophets to bring about Ahab's disaster, after God has already withheld that judgment once. So, the claim was that God lied in these verses. I mean, clearly it does say the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these prophets, even if it's an indirect lie, right? But if you read the context, Micah is saying these words, not the author of the book. And it's based off of a scene that he was allowed to witness and then tell King Ahab about the prophets that were lying to him. And Micah uses the word put, but God did not literally put anything. And Micah even tells Ahab that to his face, but Ahab still decides to go to war. So is God not just or a hypocrite for allowing a spirit to make the prophets deceive Ahab? Ahab even hears both sides of it from Micah. Or is God lying because he allows a creature in his creation to lie to another creation? No. It's explicit here. God didn't put the spirit there, and God didn't even tell anyone to lie. In that scene that Micah is telling Ahab about in verses 18 to 22. He only allowed a spirit to complete his judgment against Ahab, where Ahab is literally told he will die. And then in the next set of verses, Ahab decided to disguise himself as a soldier and go to battle anyways. And guess what? Ahab dies. Do I think that God lied or did anything unjust there? No. I can absolutely see how you could look at those verses and come to the conclusion that God is a hypocrite or unjust or lying, even if it's indirectly in that scripture. But I can also see from the context a sovereign God allowing free will to dictate how something happens instead of just crushing Ahab or maybe hitting him with a bolt of lightning. Do you know the song Awesome God? It says, "Our God is an awesome God, he reigns. From heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Well, whether you like it or not, he is just and justified in passing judgment by using something in a creation that he is sovereign over. Go storm the gates.